Hello, my name is Paulina Puentes, and today I will be talking about learning issues that resulted due to COVID 19 in 2020. Now, today I'll be talking about um, how it changed education and how many people were affected, how were they affected, and how we fixed it with time. Now, with the shutdown, there were around 1.6 billion students that were affected, and this was all around the world. It was mostly people that were in low income or middle income countries or households, and learning moved overnight basically, and it was really rapid, and this helped education keep going. However, it was also raising struggles for teachers as well as students because it was very isolating. Now, for learning loss, this is also very important because there were a lot of students who fell behind once learning moved online. For example, I could say that my experience during high school was very much um, like I would set alarms because I would just be falling asleep between classes, so it was almost like it was too easy to not pay attention. So it was just like the lack of communication with teachers, the lack of, physical communication, and there was no assistance with like questions on homework. It just wasn't the same like being in a classroom with a teacher. And there was also a study that there was months of education that was lost for students once the once school was moved from in person to online. Everyone just started their education deteriorated just because we weren't used to it, and it took time to adapt to what we were actually doing online. So there was actually a study at the end of 2021 where there was an average of 5 months that students were behind in math, and that people were also behind in reading, and people were behind 4 months in reading. The most crucial group of students that were affected by being online was younger students because they missed the social education that they get with being with their peers, and just the early stages of being in a classroom is very important. So missing that was a very negative thing for students. However, how some struggled to learn, others struggled even to access learning at all. Oh. Now, for access for technology, not every student had access to a computer, to a tablet, or even to a phone, or maybe even Wi-Fi. There's students that had to park close to a coffee shop or just sit in a coffee shop in order to be in a place that had connection for them to do homework. So that played a big part in online learning, was the lack of access to technology. And because of that, so many students struggled more on top of the isolation, on top of the lack of communication. They also had the lack of access to even be on a Zoom meeting or complete a assignment. In some situations, there were families that were sharing one device, so there would be one computer for one family, and they were just, taking turns. And that just shows that there's other families that they don't have the same access that everyone else does, and they have an extra set of struggles that they have to go through during this period. However, access was also not the only problem. The human side of learning was also deeply affected because learning has a lot to do with connection with your teacher and with your peers and being able to have experiences and learn together. When you don't have that, it's very different. COVID-19 also separated students and it removed them from their community. It separated them from their friends, from their teachers, from their normal routines. Everything just had a big switch, and it was from everything to nothing, basically. And a lot of students reported they were feeling lonely, they were feeling anxious and or unmotivated. Without in-person learning, it was harder to build relationships with students as well as teachers. The same happened for teachers who were under a lot of stress that had to do this rapid change from going to in-person to online and having basically little to no help because everything is online. You couldn't talk to anybody in person. So on the teacher side, it was also very difficult, and they had to adapt to these different routines that they had to go through. And a CDC showed that in 2021, more than 1 in 3 students in high school reported poor mental health during the pandemic. And while the students and teachers were struggling emotionally, the whole system was struggling to keep up academically.